You're listening to the Miles Ahead podcast with Dr. Miles Graham Salisbury, where he shares tactics, techniques, and protocols to improve your physical, spiritual, and mental fitness in order to become self-led, grounded, and integrated.
And we're back, Miles Ahead podcast. I've been buddy Mike or Michael, and I want to pronounce the last name properly in Slovenia. Is it Ljubsa?
There you go. That was perfect. Yeah.
I bet you everybody calls you Ljubsa, or what it gets butchered, I'm sure.
Ljubsa. The J is, I mean, I could get really technical. It's not technically silent, but just to make it easy on people, I say it's a silent J.
There you go. There you go. So Slovenian by ancestry, but Canadian by nationality.
Yep.
And living
both my parents moved to Canada when they were 16 and 18. My mom 16, my dad 18. And then, I was born in Edmonton, Canada.
Edmonton, cool. And now you're in Jamaica.
Yeah, live in Jamaica now. So I am, my name's Mike. I'm the owner of Mycomeditations, which is a psilocybin-assisted therapy retreat in Jamaica. And I'm also one of the senior facilitators there. And we've been going into our 11th year in business now, actually, as a company, and we've helped over 2,000 people in that time and administered over 6,000 psilocybin therapy doses. So That's what brought a Canadian down to Jamaica, where I've been living for the past about 4 years now. Yeah, doing this work full time.
So you went down for yourself and you loved it and you wanted to stay? Is that how it worked out?
It's a long story. I mean, it's how I got into this world of psychedelic retreats it goes back when I was a young adult and really struggling with a lot of things in my life. I kind of also related to how you brought up my parents. I mean, my parents came to this country and to Canada with, typical immigrant story, not really any money to their name, came just to pursue some family that had preceded them to Canada. And as generationally and from a cultural standpoint, I was raised with a very strict, authoritative upbringing, which I think, and I look back, I respect and I admire in a lot of ways. I think it gave me a lot of good qualities that I'm thankful for having now. But naturally, it came with some shortcomings, which left me struggling as a young man. And what that kind of looked like for me is I kind of made it through high school, I would say relatively unscathed. But as I started to get to that phase of grade 12 ending and looking ahead into the next phase of life, I remember starting to feel what anxiety actually is at that point. And that cloud of depression sort of starting to weigh in on me. And it took a few months to even know what was happening. But by the time I had got into my freshman year at McEwen University in Edmonton, it was very clear I was having some issues. And, I go to a therapist for the first time and it's like, oh yeah, that's depression. That's anxiety. It's like, oh yeah, okay. That thing I just didn't really understand and just only vaguely heard about was all consuming actually for me very, very quickly as an adult. And yeah, it kind of quickly threw me into the world of, all right, well, I've got to figure this out. I mean, I have a bit of I think, obsessive personality, which was a part of the issue in the earlier years of my life too. So when I have a problem, I fixate on it. And at that point in my life, it was very obvious that I had a problem within myself with thoughts that I knew didn't seem to belong there, or my interpersonal relationships felt like they were really weak and kind of inauthentic, and things that really stuck out to me that were very glaring problems. So at the age of 18, I was already quite fixated on like, all right, what caused this? Where is this all coming from? And yeah, I jumped into the world of therapy like most people who are having a problem. Different rounds of medications, not really to much effect. I mean, therapy helped, I think, just to have someone to talk to for the first time in my life.
Right.
But inadvertently, I stumbled across mushrooms actually when I was 19, kind of in the midst of this phase where I was very depressed, anxious. Also, alongside that, I had a very big gambling problem on sports, particularly. Yeah, I don't know if that's something you and I have ever spoken about in the past.
No.
But for a good year and a half, 2 years, I was like a compulsive sports gambler, betting anywhere from a few hundred to a few $1,000s a day on football, basketball, hockey, baseball.
All of it. Wow.
And just took over my life. I mean, I remembered my first serious girlfriend at the time. We'd be going out for dinner, and you've got $1,000 on the game or something like that, right? So, like, as you imagine, I'm not very present. I'm pulling on my phone, just got the score app updated every 30 seconds, and just that was my life at that point. That was all I was really capable of, and just consumed with my mind and the things that it was just bringing up that I didn't know how to contend with at the time, and just no idea what was happening all of a sudden, and just sort of struggling to get by. And found that world, though, thankfully, of just psychedelics in a very, very roundabout kind of way of, as most people, just finding them to do recreationally at the beginning. Right. And very quickly realizing that was a very unique experience that I wanted to understand a little bit better. I mean, I still recall actually my first experience, which was just a beautiful summer night with a few of my really good friends at my one friend's house, just hanging out in the backyard, having a beer, but like having a couple grams of mushrooms and just talking so freely and laughing in such a attuned kind of way with one another. And the whole time I was also cognizant of the fact that this almost felt more natural and real than anything I had ever experienced before, and in a way that didn't feel drug induced, even though I was obviously on mushrooms. Sure. There was something about it that wasn't like when we would go and have a few drinks and have a good time. There was something beyond it. There was a layer to it that was very mysterious and very compelling to me. Yeah. And that kind of just hooked me. And I remember going home later that evening, and it's like 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm laying in my bed and I'm just Googling about psychedelics and depression and how does all of this fit? And like just on the side of my bed, scrolling, looking at all this different research that was actually already coming out in the early days of the psychedelic renaissance. And I remember the first experience being like, wow, this is really showing me some things about myself. Like, this feels like it's actually a way to kind of walk me home into wholeness and just have like an inkling that something like that could happen. And then to see all of this early research kind of validating it. Of course, there wasn't a lot of it, and the numbers were very small, but it resonated very deeply with what I clearly understood from like the first time I had this experience. And then of course, I just wanted to keep kind of pursuing this path. And I became that friend in my circle who was like, all right, when's the next time we're doing mushrooms? Like, that was great kind of thing, And so we had a few different experiences like that over the next like year or so, and maybe 3 or 4 very similar types of experiences, recreational, fun, not really heavy partying, but just like hanging out around a fire, having a good time kind of experiences, all about the social aspect of it, which was really nice.
It sounds like
there was one. Go on.
I was just going to say, you sound like you're using the logos logic a lot to work with your stuff, and you use the word attunement when you were on psilocybin for the first time, felt attuned to everything. I wonder if that got you into your body and your logos got to like take a chill pill for a little bit, and maybe that felt nice.
Yes, I would say in hindsight, I make that conclusion, but at the time, all it really felt like it was finally like the walls between myself and other people just faded, Exactly. And I didn't realize how big the walls were until they were gone, kind of thing. Yeah. And then that understanding of, oh, interesting. I mean, here I have been talking to therapists for years saying how distant I feel from people, how alone I feel, how inauthentic I feel when I try to maneuver relationships, and then to have it all just sort of strip away and it felt like stars kind of coming into alignment in a little bit. And I knew it wasn't permanent. That was the key. I was like, okay, I'm not just going to be high on mushrooms for the rest of my life, but I understand that this is giving me like at least a window of time in which I can explore some really deep psychological stuff at play here. So that was kind of where that pursuit kind of came from, was it felt like it was really bringing out a part of me that felt more authentic and more true than anything I had been taught at that point in my life to connect with. I mean, this kind of goes back to where I started this story of just strict upbringing with parents that didn't really, I didn't really have an identity that was forged through my home. I was actually just thinking this the other day as I was going for my walk, where there was just there wasn't a lot of intellectual stimulation or like if I expressed some sort of curiosity about something as a kid, it wasn't like something that was fostered, things just kind of come and went. Like I had a big interest in music as like a very, very young kid. Like we used to have these big cultural events at a Slovenian Canadian cultural center. And like, there's all these home cassettes of me like going onto the stage as there's like a polka band playing and like I'm pretending to play alongside them. And I brought like little toy instruments. It's like, how do you not put that kid into music, for example? But like my parents didn't really make those kind of conclusions of, oh, this kid has an interest in something. Let's allow this to be a thing that becomes a little bit of his identity or something he can engage himself with. There was just not really a lot of that kind of stuff. And then that's just where these sort of roots, I think, that followed me into adulthood, where I felt very disconnected with life all around me, sort of then presented itself. And yeah, to me, at least my process of healing it just so happened to be mushrooms and psychedelics for me. And that was where I found myself, of course, exploring this with my friends. And then, that quintessential quote unquote bad trip happened, which re-examined kind of everything at that point. Because I remember actually distinctly having a thought once like, oh, I guess I don't have bad trips. Just like, this has just been great every single time. And it was an experience at my house with 3 of my best friends, but for whatever reason on that day, a different side of my mind needed to be shown to me. And I was it's as much as the certain experiences before that removed the walls and allowed me to become closer to people, it was almost like this experience showed me how thick the walls actually have been and were going to be. And that awareness of just very clearly seeing that divide between myself and other people for hours, and the space and the aloneness I felt, it basically just rung around in my head in a loop for hours. And, at that age, at that capacity, I just didn't know what to even do with that. And given we were all trying to do this recreationally, it was just a clunky experience. And it left me pretty shaken up, but not in a way that was like, oh, I never want to do that again. That sucked. That was scary. But in a very compelling kind of way of, like that somehow that showed me more about myself than anything I've ever known before. Like how dark and how much wounding there really is within me. And rather than turning away from that and just pretending it never happened, I just kind of actually, again, continued to lean into that and be equally curious about the dark as I was with the light kind of aspects of this drug that somehow just brings whatever is within you to the surface and leaves it for you to do something with, for better or for worse, for if it's smooth or if it's challenging. I would say that was kind of like a key thing I'm thankful that I grasped pretty early on. It's like, oh, this isn't like a happy and sad thing. This isn't a good and a bad. This is just easy or challenging and, comfortable or uncomfortable, but all for the better. And that's, I guess, where I would say my real pursuit with this stuff actually started, was where I started to I really understood how deep this could go and how difficult the experiences can be and how much trauma actually can rise to the surface through these experiences. And then it just became a journey of, okay, well, that's within me. And so let's learn how to actually work with these substances more.
Yeah. It sounds like it sort of helps the ego to kind of take a chill pill, and deeper parts are allowed to emerge. You use some very Jungian terms, lightness and shadow. And I always hear when people say they have a bad trip, it's just maybe some part of their ego still there saying, we don't like pain, we should avoid pain, this isn't okay, when really that's trying to teach you something about your pain. And if you surrender into it rather than fight it, it actually goes better for you. Just trying to teach you something about pain. Is that I mean, I hear that a lot. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a key piece to all of this work, and even just therapy in general. It has nothing even to do with psychedelics. It's just
Good
some
point.
facet of being human, you know?
Good point. Yeah.
It's the thing is with psychedelics, they're just amplifiers. I mean, that's something that they're actually considered scientifically as a non-specific amplifier. So if you and then there's layers to this kind of mystery too, where if it's a non-specific amplifier of what's within you, well, what does that actually mean? Then you have everything that's, again, on the Jungian kind of explanation of this stuff. The persona, the things you know, the things you've kind of owned for yourself, typically the good things that you want and you've been told this is a part of my identity, this is acceptable, versus all the shadowy stuff you've also experienced in your life that either you or your parents or your friends or society has told you is not good. That doesn't go away. It's just a different part of the psyche, you know? And just like in a way you try to do this work to bring yourself into wholeness, just to heal in general, if you introduce a psychedelic into the equation, that process is just much bigger and much more intense, but really all about the same things where this is in me whether I like it or not, you know? It's there that's why I experienced it. So now what? And now it's about actually processing things. And in the early days, I just didn't know, well, what is processing? That's to feel your emotions. That's to get reconnected to your body, as you asked about. That's what processing actually looks like. And it's not just about the experience in your mind, but just that journey to actually go deeper into the world of processing your felt experiences in the past. Because I mean, at this point in my life, having done my own work, having seen just all the guests we've had come down to our retreat, like we quite literally, human beings to me are like, we kind of have like a filter mechanism of all the stuff that we've experienced in our life, and filters need to be exchanged. They need to be cleaned. Like they take in a lot of heavy shit that doesn't just go away. And so, well, then the question is, how can we clear this stuff out? And I mean, psychedelics are as great of a tool as any to really see what's really been in your space, in your mind. What have you experienced over? I mean, the way that the society is now, it's almost like we're setting up a stage where when people start to experience this stuff, it's such a foreign experience to people as a whole that we're going to have such a backlog of big stuff to deal with because we've never learned how to really clear stuff out. And in the early days of my work with this, it's like kind of overwhelming. It's big and intense, and it requires a lot of care. But you in that process, you kind of get better at just learning to stay on top of that experience in the day-to-day better, so that there's just not so much heavy stuff all layered on. And it's quite miraculous that we actually have medicines that very plainly allow people to truly see the contents of their mind and all of this stuff that we've experienced. And just by proxy of being imperfect as human beings, we don't know how to manage everything. We don't know how to feel everything. We don't know how to process everything. Some people, nature versus nurture. Some people by genetics have a bit of a better disposition to handle certain things. Some people, due to their environment, are taught to handle things certain better. But nonetheless, most people don't have like the holy grail of all of those things all at the same time. And so naturally stuff just sits there that isn't really meant to be there in the long run. It's pain, it's trauma. And trauma, that's where trauma can get down to like the very little nuanced things that just sit there that aren't big things that we speak of when it comes to trauma, but it's just little tiny things that accumulate over years and years and years and years that we've never really, we don't know how to attend to. And I mean, I'm just a huge proponent personally for psychedelics because that's been my centerpiece. That's kind of the central spoke to all the work I've done on my journey. And I think it's something the world needs to take a lot more seriously than it does. And I'm excited that we are going in the right direction because I get the benefit of almost working on the inside of this world and having lived it myself and then seen other people go through these experiences all through a very therapeutic lens as well, that I just know what's on the other side of that. And it's profound. And so it's a very exciting world to be in. And it's helped me in just immeasurable ways. I mean, I almost can't even remember the person I used to be 5, 10 years ago,
Wow,
interestingly enough, in a
that's a
certain
big
way
change.
of just, in a way of like, I don't need to identify with the pains I used to. I understand my past and I see the whole picture, but I don't. Thankfully, I've learned to move on through a lot of things in a
Mhm.
way I don't think I ever would have been capable of. In fact, I remember very clearly thinking to myself, I don't know how I will ever overcome some of these challenges I'm facing. But
Mhm.
I didn't even mention I also struggled with a very strange type of obsessive compulsive disorder that most people probably wouldn't even understand is a type of OCD where, believe it or not, I, for about 2, 3 years of my life, obsessed about my sexuality. And what that would look like is I couldn't go through a social interaction without trying to assess my sexual attraction to someone. Was it
Sure.
there? Was it not there? How does this fit with my identity of sexuality?
Mhm.
And I understood also eventually through this work where that came from. There were
Mhm.
roots of trauma on that side of things for me. And I was able to help move myself through all of that stuff. And then naturally, these kind of symptoms and conditions just sort of slip away when you do the work and the healing. They just, I remember always being told OCD is just something you're going to have to manage for the rest of your life. It's not something you overcome. And
God,
at
I
this
hate
point in my
that.
life, I can say I've overcome it. So it's an
You can
interesting
absolutely
dynamic.
That's the worst. I know that, and that's not weird. I've actually experienced quite a few people similar along some
Yeah,
lines. There's sexual trauma. You can obsess and have compulsive behaviors over anything, so it
all sorts of things.
makes sense to
Yeah.
manifest that way for sure.
OCD just tends to very much get fixated on like the orderliness stuff,
Yep.
which isn't even OCD in most people's descriptions, or like
It's just the
germs
topical.
and sanitation
Yeah,
type stuff. Yeah, it's
exactly.
like
Yeah,
people think of the external compulsive acts to try to subdue the symptom, but like there can be a whole mental loop where it doesn't even go external. And I
correct.
lived that world for many, many years, and it's not a
Yeah.
comfortable experience.
It's not, and it's also pretty scary because no one around you really even knows. Because if someone's doing like, I have to touch the doorknob 100 times, like you can see that and go, oh, you need help. If it's happening internally, you think
Yeah.
you're crazy, and nobody knows that you're doing that. A lot of
Yeah.
times it gets confused for like ADHD because you have no attention because you're ruminating and doing the obsessive things in your head rather than externally. So it gets
Yeah.
misdiagnosis as that or like a tic or something.
Yeah.
It's
And it
fascinating.
often involves a very taboo type of subject. Like in my case, I felt very uncomfortable bringing this to the surface. Eventually, there were a few people I learned to talk about it with. But I also remember going to a support group at one time, and there was a woman there I remember who had like 2 or 3 kids, and her OCD was about whether or not she was a pedophile. Because
Right.
if she would just like look at her kid in a way or like,
Right.
give them
Yeah.
laugh, like start questioning if there was something malicious going on in this process. Like,
Yeah.
how do you talk to people about that? That you're having thoughts about whether or not you're a pedophile to your
Yeah.
child. Like for most people are going to beg the question of like, well, why are you thinking that way? Like it doesn't really get handled in a very nuanced way in
No,
most
it doesn't.
scenarios. And you know that. And so it just
Yeah.
makes it very tough to speak about. And I can only imagine
Totally.
what a woman who's going through that kind of experience is going through.
That's very painful. Yeah, it gets sort of delusional at some point because you start like gaslighting yourself basically. Of course you're not a pedophile, and like the pedophile is never going to go to therapy and ask, am I a pedophile? Like they're just going to struggle with it and like not do anything about it. If you're saying something, it's probably OCD or something similar. You can obsess over anything and have worry about the weirdest stuff with OCD. It's just
Yeah.
anxiety off the rails. I mean, it's on that whole
Yeah.
anxiety spectrum. It's cool to hear that psilocybin can work with that. And then the whole field of psychedelic assisted psychotherapy is coming, which is cool. I'd imagine you've done a little bit of that while working through your own stuff with someone who can help you. And that's probably what you do at your
Yeah.
retreats, I would imagine. That's the kind of the point.
Yeah. And that's kind of how the journey just became deeper and deeper. I think where I left off was, I had a challenging experience. Then, well, what's next? And it's like, okay, I don't want to do this in a recreational setting anymore. Like if the train's going off the rails, I can't rely on my friends to help me through that, nor do I want to. Like this is a different type of experience now. And so, well, what can I do with this? So then I that's where my reading on the topic and the research is like, okay, the clinical research of this looks like a person laying down, internalized kind of experience, and eye mask is on, music. So you're trying to take your attention and move it inside rather than, externalizing the experience, which is really the only way I had done the experiences at that point in my life. And so it was like, okay, Terrence McKenna says you go into a dark room and you do 5 grams and you see what happens, basically. I didn't jump to that number so quickly. I mean, I was very measured and cautious at the beginning. So just rather than doing 2 or 3 grams with friends, it's like, okay, let's do 2 or 3 grams by myself and see what happens. And then, naturally you have a bit more of an introspective experience that builds certain insights that can be quite profound. And then I started to, genuinely do it in a dark room at night. I would save this to be kind of a thing I would do on Friday and Saturday nights when I didn't have anything to do the next day. The day was kind of done. I could really just focus on this, set everything else aside, and just see what happened. And in the early days, it was very, very exploratory for me. But I had a very therapeutic intention with all of it. I really wanted to understand myself better and understand why these darker experiences were happening. Like, what's the story behind this? Like, I know there's more going on with these kind of intrusive thoughts that enter and this like self-loathing that comes up. Like, where the hell does this come from? And naturally, similar types of experiences were still happening. And I didn't quite understand how to really break through into that. Like, now I'm probably 20, 21, 22 around this time in this period of my life, and still not the most experienced with the world of emotion, as most men in general and young men particularly are, which is just not something I was raised to understand very well. So that was kind of the wall. If you don't know how to process your emotions and feel your stuff, then you just can't really get very far. That's kind of the limiting factor. It's like, all right, until you can feel things, this is as far as you can kind of go. And I knew that. So all it was really doing was reflecting back to me all of this painful stuff in a hope to have me surrender to what's really behind it. But at that point in my life, like, I'm scared. I don't know what all of this stuff really, like, I want to feel better, but like, I don't know how to do that yet because it feels so daunting. And like, what's on the other side of that? Am I going to lose my mind? And, it scratches that surface a little bit. And so there's like, okay, well, what's the next step out of this? And so that's where I started to actually explore the world of the underground therapy side of psychedelics. And what that looked like is I just actually cold emailed James Fadiman, who is a well-known psychedelic researcher. And shockingly, he got back to me. And in my email, I was just like, hey, James, do you know a psychedelic therapist I could work with? And just gave him a bit of my story. And fingers crossed, this random researcher gets back to me. And sure enough, he did. He actually linked me up with a woman in Mill Valley, California, which is just north of San Francisco. So I flew down there in the summer of 2016. And I'd say that was my like first foray into working with psychedelics in a like legitimately therapeutic kind of way.
Yeah.
And within that, I think I was there for 5 days, and we made an arrangement to work with MDMA one day. And then 2 days later, I would work with psilocybin. And the MDMA was something at that point I think I might have only done once recreationally. Didn't really know what to expect with that one. But in some discussions we had beforehand, a little bit of an extra backstory. My father actually passed away from cancer when I was 15. And so as we spoke about what I was kind of going through, she suggested okay, you'll be here for about 5 days. I'm thinking we work with MDMA for one of those sessions, and then 2 days later, psilocybin. So that was kind of the plan when I showed up there. And lo and behold, we take the MDMA on the first session, and it was a more conversational style of MDMA therapy. Like, if you read about the MAPS research, it looks a lot like the psilocybin trials, where it's someone laying down, eye mask on, music on. And if they want to get up and talk, there are therapists there, but it's still a more internalized experience first. It's kind of like, go with the medicine, let's see what comes up. And if you need to talk, we can talk. versus this one kind of out of the gates was more conversational. And I remember for about the first 30 minutes, it was almost as if she was prodding at different areas and different topics. I'm like, well, what's the thread here that we can kind of go deeper into? Like, what can I pull on in this kid in a way? And so sure enough, we got to the topic of my dad, and I'm sure I had like a little bit of a quiver in my voice and just like the impact of his passing on me. And then that's where she directed the conversation. And through that dialogue, it basically led me to re-experience the night he died, because he died in our living room. We'd brought a bed over where he had been laying for about 2-3 weeks at that point. And the very next day, he was supposed to be taken to a hospice, which would be the end for him. So this was really like the last day at home. And during that night, he kind of called for a little bit of assistance to just have help with drinking some water. And I went there alone. I think my sister was upstairs. My mom was somewhere else, and I helped him have a little drink. But he started to actually choke from the water, and he never actually like restabilized after that point. So like him choking on the water I was helping to feed him was kind of the thing that instigated his death. And it's not really like I don't think I internalized so much this like blame of myself kind of situation, like I caused him to die. It wasn't so much that was the story there, but it was all just very alive and very like, he's calm. I give him a drink and he just starts choking and coughing, can't really get his breath underway, to call my sister down, get my mom. And like it just set into motion things in like a very heavy way very quickly.
For sure.
And so I was there for the final I love yous and goodbyes and the tears and all that stuff. And then just that whole experience. I mean, I was crying that night, and I remember doing a lot of processing as a 15-year-old can at that point.
Sure.
Where my mom, kind of in European fashion, called a lot of the friends over, like people I'd referred to as aunts and uncles over the years, to kind of be there with the body in the hours that passed. And I actually remember one of his friends came by, and I was off in our other kind of room in the house crying to myself. And he tried to come in there and give me this sort of speech of like, you can't cry, you're the man now. And I just flippantly told him to fuck off kind of thing. 15-year-old kid. And so just like, I was already doing some processing at that point. I wasn't like, I'm a boy, I can't cry, but there's only just so much you can really do. And so during this MDMA session, it was as if like every minute of that experience basically replayed itself. And I was able to have all of the same kind of emotional chords come alive again. And it was just as deep, like the sorrow and the sadness, as the first time I went through it. Just whatever was almost left, though, where it's like, okay, now we're really getting to the bottom of this group. And so, yeah, that very much, that was a big process that I would say lasted for a good hour of the experience. And then it was just sort of a soft landing of adjusting on the other side. But I remember I went for a little hike after this session in the Marin Highlands, which are just the beautiful hills that kind of overlook San Francisco, and just, you know, feeling so clear, like I'd actually kind of gotten to a very clear next stage and chapter of, okay, like I've accepted his passing in a way I haven't been able to yet. That was very deep for me. And then it led to the next session, which was a very different type of experience, which was this was with mushrooms now. First time doing this therapeutically with a therapist present. Just a surreal, vivid, visionary experience. It had this big underwater quality. Like imagine just neon colors where you're going through some odyssey where all of your own inner mechanisms are kind of reflected to you as these like underwater cavernous caves that you go through, all with different sort of themes and metaphor and different types of emotions it's bringing up. But the key one with that experience for me is I'd experienced my first heartbreak maybe 6 months before that, at that time, with my girlfriend who I'd been with for 2.5 years. And I'd say that was actually the biggest thing I processed in that experience, was like actually learning how to let go of that experience. And I remember actually the vision specifically of how that all kind of clicked into place for me, where it was with this water theme. She was almost as if I saw her as this big ship with like, those kind of old school, like the angel carving wooden thing design on the front of the ship kind of thing. It was like she embodied this kind of unique ship for her. And it was like it was parting the shore or the bay for the last time, and I was saying goodbye kind of thing. And I just sobbed like uncontrollably. Like it was just like feeling stuff for the first time. And like, this is what we're supposed to be feeling. This is this is the depth of our experiences. And this is actually how we have to learn and give ourselves permission to feel things at this level. This is how we get better. And that was where it started all kind of click into place for me of like, you need to feel things to heal. And like, there's a lot to feel. there's a deep well in every single person, And so that was kind of that next stage of, this is the power of really doing this therapeutically, where you feel safe enough to ultimately feel those feelings, because many people have been told that it's unsafe, or they've felt it's unsafe to ever give themselves permission to sort of turn themselves over to that.
Especially men.
Exactly, especially men. And so I was able to sort of stumble my way into a world where I grasped how that actually looks and how that actually feels, and the power of working with psychedelics therapeutically. And then, that's kind of what sprung me. I did a few other things like that, where I went to Boston, similarly working with a therapist, and in that one, LSD and psilocybin, both, again, very big ones. I actually uncovered a lot of the roots to some the sexual trauma that was tied to my OCD when I did my psilocybin session there in Boston, where what a repressed memory is actually became very clear to me at that point. Where, long story short, I had something come to the surface that undeniably was a repressed experience that I'd had, just in terms of how deep the emotion was, how clear I was, and how oriented I was in age, where I was in a particular place, like crystal clear memory in a way that my mind doesn't usually operate at. And that's also where I learned our minds sometimes, especially when we've been traumatized, we dissociate, and we literally pack certain experiences away to the point of we may not even know they're in there.
Correct.
But you want to be able to open that door in a safe container so that if something is in there, it has its space to come out, because that was an experience where I was throwing up for 30 minutes, crying all at the same time, purging at the deepest level. And that's also what healing looks like. It's not pretty. It can be brutal. It can be ugly, but it's powerful. Yeah. And that's just the wonder of this stuff. But that is the importance of, working with these medicines in the responsible way, in truly therapeutic kind of capacities, because it's heavy stuff. If the door does get opened and you do have a background trauma, you don't want to be alone when you have that experience.
Yeah, I've heard people doing MDMA at a party, and then that shit gets unlocked, and they're not having fun. They're on the floor in the fetal position or some shit like that.
And then, and what the risk of that is, it kind of re-shames the whole process, where it's shame-inducing to begin with, hence why it was repressed and locked away. It's messy and kind of uncomfortable in some complex way. And now you're in a space where you encounter it potentially for the first time in your life or a long time, but you're now in a space where you feel you need to pack it back down, and maybe you're getting reactions from other people that are also shame-inducing, and they don't really know any better. They're not equipped to know what that looks like or what to do with that. So it's complex. It can definitely be messy, but it's the importance of really knowing how to work with the medicines themselves, learning how to navigate the experiences, but also having the skilled support alongside you.
The skilled support's huge. And the setting an intention, that seems to be a big one. Because if your intention is just to F off, it's going to be fun and goofy. But if your intention is to go within, it's sort of like your mind goes with what your intention is. And I can totally see how the eye mask and sensory deprivation part can be quite helpful, because we do tend to externalize and look outwards. Like Traver Bums came back from his darkness retreat. Talk about psychedelics. Like your brain has these endogenous aspects of it that you will hallucinate for sure. And psilocybin and these other psychedelics get you there in a different way. And speaking of that, what are your thoughts on the juxtaposition of psilocybin versus like ayahuasca? And I hear a lot about, like I had Zach Miller on from Men Uncivilized. He did Ibogaine followed up with 5-MeO DMT at the end. It was quite helpful for him for his trauma. Have you done any of these other ones? What do you think the difference is? Do you have an opinion?
I've actually done the exact same protocol with Iboga and 5-MeO, so I'm familiar with that whole situation. I've done that once, but I would say the way I describe these different types of medicines to people, whether it's the psychedelics or the classical psychedelics, so that would be mushrooms, LSD, and the DMT containing medicines. Then you've kind of got the adjacent ones with San Pedro and Iboga and, the mescalines with peyote alongside that as well. And there's their whole world of like designer drugs and everything like that too. But the way I see all of this stuff is these medicines tend to all kind of work in the same way. They're just sort of speaking a different language. Like it's all about becoming open to yourself and to experience and to potentially something even outside of yourself, of course. That's the whole transcendent mystical side of this world too. But it's all about, I think, actually just bringing things to the surface and seeing everything that there is within yourself and outside of yourself. And they all just kind of have a different way of doing that, and in their own very clever, very profound, deep sort of ways. I mean, the only one I would say I've done mushrooms truly, an honest guess is probably 100 times. And that's also like large doses on average. Most of those are probably like 5 to 10 grams in that threshold.
Damn.
I'm more familiar with it's a true therapeutic dose, I think, to actually start to see 5 grams. Like that's really where the rubber hits the road if you're in the right setting with it. So I'd say my experience with mushrooms greatly surpasses my experience with any of the other ones. I mean, I've done ayahuasca 5 times. I've done 5-MeO, like big experiences with 5-MeO. I think I've done 5 times, but also in like a microdosing kind of way. Then I've done LSD therapeutically as well about 10 times, and Iboga once, peyote twice. And they've all kind of been their own, kind of like their own sort of wise elder kind of persona of impact in my life. They've all sort of shown a different things, and they've all spoken to me in a different way. And I kind of feel called in different ways over the years to go explore one or the other. I would say how they all compare is what I don't really like about this space that I think is a little bit, I don't think is the most accurate per se, is there seems to always be this description of like hierarchy in a way where maybe oftentimes it's like, okay, you start with MDMA because it's not really a psychedelic and it's like an empathogen. It's just going to be light and it's just a reliable way to sort of alter your mind without it being too heavy. Or
ketamine.
Or ketamine. Yeah, ketamine is a soft one relatively as well. And then it's like maybe you'd say mushrooms and LSD is a step above that. And then there's kind of this world though of like once you get to ayahuasca and DMT, it's a different type of thing. And well, it is a different type of thing because you tend to work with doses that bring you to come almost completely outside of yourself, like total ego dissolution. But that can happen on mushrooms or LSD in the exact same way if you take a high enough dose. And I've been to those places on mushrooms many times where it's pure DMT territory in terms of what I've experienced on smoked DMT, or the few times I have done ayahuasca, with how interdimensional that almost seems to be in a certain way. Like I've been there on mushrooms as well. And so they all bring a certain type of just a unique quality. I think that's for certain types of minds can maybe work a little bit better. For example, I would say mushrooms can almost they seem to almost be, in my experience, it's like something that can almost ensnare you in your own mechanisms, and through being kind of stuck in a sticky experience that takes a little longer to sort of work through is kind of how you solve the issue at hand, or in that process, emotion is able to almost backdoor you in a very clever way so that you process what needs to be processed. Versus my experiences with ayahuasca are much more like, all right, we're going at this pace, whether you like it or not, kind of a thing, and it's like just a little bit of a different way of speaking to the person experiencing it is my experience. And I mean, from my one iboga experience, I would almost say that that's a different type of experience altogether.
I've heard it's pretty hardcore.
I would say it was daunting because it has a reputation based on everything I just kind of described. I mean, iboga is kind of like the granddaddy of them all. I mean, this thing is going to be a day of what you're wrestling with and stuff. Like, it's a big
whole day.
process. Yeah, it's 24 hours. It's a legit 24-hour psychoactive experience that's very, very intense. But it has a different quality to it than I would say ayahuasca or mushrooms. I would describe iboga as more dreamlike. Like, on a one hand, you're more lucid, like you're not so outside of yourself in a way that the psychedelics bring on. But there's also a certain level of depth to what that dream state actually takes you into. That there's almost another aspect to the experience available of, you can stay cognitively yourself and your sense of self can remain intact, but in the same way of the psychedelics, you go just as deep into kind of like the core workings of your mind. And so it's just a very different type of thing, which I would say, like, when I do mushrooms, I can kind of just slide into the experience. Like, I just understand how to swim in those waters, if that makes sense, versus I feel like a fish out of water with iboga. It's just like, what is this thing? Like, it took a few hours, I think, just to even know what was really going on with it. Yeah. And even then, I look back.
Is that an eye mask one too? I heard you're supposed to close your eyes with that one, or does it not like that?
It was more internal. I mean, I did it I did it in Calgary, Alberta. So very like atypical. It was not like a Bwiti tradition, or I didn't go to like a retreat. I didn't go to a clinic using ibogaine in Mexico. Those are kind of the main ways it's done. It's either like a retreat or a clinic kind of thing. And this was a little group that kind of just does it their own way. We had almost a rule in place where it's a silent ceremony. So the expectation is just it's silence. You can ask for help, but it was almost giving you the expectation to just be quiet, which has its pros and cons, I think. The pro that I made out of it, I think you can make your pros, and it's like, okay, this is the constraint. What am I going to do with this? Is like there was a certain level of sensory deprivation that I felt within it, because you're just in this altered space after the 12th hour, you almost feel like this thing's just like a part of your being, and yet you haven't said a word this whole time. No one's moved the whole time. Like, it's just eerily quiet. Like, the walls are just bouncing back at you with your thoughts that have a completely different texture due to this deep, deep, deep medicine. Like, it's powerful in that way. But I think if I were to go back at it again, I would like a little bit more of what the traditional ceremony and some of the retreats that offer iboga tend to work with, where it's around a fire. There's a little bit of a more energetic component to it. And I can see why that would be beneficial, because of how deep it brings you into your mind. And I'm a very cerebral person by default, that I think if there's not some like complementing aspect to it, like it'll do what it did to me, which I ended up getting what I needed to and got the message eventually. But I just was looping around in my mind for about 12 to 16 hours until it started to like really click on what these thoughts were all actually trying to show me, because it wasn't speaking clearly at all. It was a very messy experience of like strange visions I couldn't really put any meaning to. It was like I felt it was tougher to get connected with my body in a certain way, but the quality of my thoughts were just sort of turning into this direction over hours and hours and hours, until I eventually hit this other little pocket of of self-loathing within myself, of like, there's a piece of me that I still do not love and I have completely shoved aside. And it was all inner child type of stuff where it was like, you still don't tend to your inner child in the way you need to. Like, you've done some of it, but you can do more is basically what it was, where it was like, there's still a pocket of you that you need to tend to a little bit more that you clearly don't love. And it wasn't until I actually put my hand up where it kind of brought me to my limit, and I finally got asked to speak to the facilitator in another room very quickly after just doing a little bit of inner child work. The dam just burst, and I felt a type of compassion for myself that up until that point I actually hadn't felt either.
Right.
And then, as you brought it up with this protocol of using 5-MeO afterwards, it's actually quite common with Iboga, from everything I've been learning as well. That for me, it was like, okay, I've got this giant hole that I need to fill with love. Like, it just hollowed me out basically, and it showed me like, this is what you need to fill now. And it almost daunting. It's like, how can I ever? How have I allowed myself to get to this point? Like, what am I supposed to do with this now? And then that's where 5-MeO speaks to you in a completely different way, where the next morning, taking 3 hits of that, it's as if you connect with the very source of existence beyond everything we have here. You know, the energy behind it is incredibly powerful, and it emanates almost that love that I needed to complement the previous experience I had. And so it showed me what that quality of unconditional love feels like, where I needed it most. And so that's kind of the way these things all sort of layer upon one another in an interesting way, which I think is just speaking to the nature of being a human being, where these plants have adapted alongside of us for millions of years through evolution. Here we are. And this is sort of the role in which we all play with one another, where there's a complementary piece to all of this. And, you know, we like to complicate it with our messy minds, but at the end of the day, it's, if we can get our minds out of the way and just let what is there unfiltered kind of come out, it regulates the whole system. You know, I kind of see our minds as this thing we don't understand, a system of things we're conscious of and things we're unconscious of, that kind of wants to be brought back into equilibrium. And on one part, we say yes to certain things and no to other things, but that's all based on our ego construct and the things we kind of falsely have determined are good or bad or appropriate or not. And it's one of the biggest things I've been able to glean from these experiences, is just everything that's within your mind is just as equal, basically, in terms of the way in which you can integrate it into your broader self.
Yeah, it sounds like you're integrating a lot of shadow work by default. And I've heard a lot of help with addictions. I think ibogaine especially, but psilocybin as well, and as an antidepressant in of ways. I've heard some people come back and like for 6 months they have no cravings, no nothing after one experience of ibogaine. I don't know if it's the same with psilocybin or not, but that's quite profound too. I don't know how that's even possible. That's incredible.
The science of this is something. I mean, I don't have the deepest understanding of the science of iboga and ibogaine, but essentially what it does, in a very summarizing kind of way, is it works predominantly on the dopamine system, versus the classical psychedelics are more serotonin based. And as we know through like books like Dopamine Nation, Anna Lemke, is this scale of pain and reward kind of is off balanced with people who have addictions, and regardless of what you're addicted about. Basically what the science is showing with iboga is it resets kind of the whole thing. And that's sort of that whole putting people through the process of detox and then getting them all out of the other side, all within one experience, is very powerful, because you don't need to wrestle. I mean, you do wrestle, you clearly do. It's harrowing for a reason, but you get through it eventually. And at least now you have a reset system to work with, where you've kind of condensed a bit of the processing that needs to happen. Now that you're out of the other end of it, you kind of have this clean slate to work with a little bit. And this is now where these things give you some new leverage in your life to kind of see things clearly, potentially for the first time in a long time. make some changes that are necessary, which will in turn kind of create a whole new environment for yourself, which makes a better life if you do it right.
Mhm.
So whether that's like addiction-based iboga or similarly what psychedelics do with people who are depressed or anxious is, this is where the whole science of the default mode network and, the very common understandings of the neuroscience of psilocybin is essentially it just gets these networks that have become almost calcified in like a stuck, rigid kind of way. And most of the illnesses that psychedelics help most are conditions that are considered low entropy. So entropy being chaos, more or less. And so if you have low entropy, that's like a highly ordered system. And so OCD, depression, anxiety,
Rigid.
these are all rigid thinking systems and mind systems. And essentially psychedelics basically, they desynchronize your brain networks that kind of hold this rigid pattern together and allow it, again, a fresh slate to kind of work with some new experience afterwards, where I think for 6 weeks, they actually show that there is a much more neuroplastic state of the brain. So kind of just means if you have some patterns you want to step away from, that's going to be a little bit easier. If you want to create some new patterns, that's going to be a little bit easier. And then you can kind of actually see it a little bit like once that system now becomes solid again and kind of becomes another fixed state, you've kind of altered it in the time that it was more malleable. And it's that's kind of the nature of these things is they all soften the mind up to almost like a childhood like state of malleability, which the child brain versus the adult brain is very different in that kind of way where it's more impressionable. And so we can kind of actually reintroduce this malleability to our brains with psychedelics, and that's what makes them so therapeutic.
That's brilliant. Yeah, I didn't think of it that way. Yeah, the child's mind is able to take on so much. Like I just got my daughter into jiu-jitsu, and she's like, like 8 classes, and she's already like choking people out. I'm like, man, that took me like a year. Like at age 35. Like, what the hell? They just pick it up, and it's like it's amazing.
Take it in. It's like why kids learn a new language so easily. Yeah, it's just the brain is just sort of waiting for input. I'm like, well, what do you want me to do with this thing? It's just, and they're so impressionable in that way, and that's how they can change so quickly and learn things so fast.
Mm-hmm. Shit. So I need to like do a bunch of this shit and then go back to jiu-jitsu. Superpower my learning will be black belt in a year.
It's interesting, man. This world there is a little world of pro athletes that have explored this whole world. And,
yes, that's true.
One is Aaron Rodgers being his ayahuasca experience as being the reason he became MVP for 2 consecutive seasons after. And I think a part of that is you stop becoming your own worst enemy and your mind starts to be your ally. And then whatever it is you do, you're going to be better at it. You know, so it's exciting beyond a just therapeutic side. I think we're really in the next decade plus, we're of course all talking about psychedelics for depression and anxiety, and that is going to be how they get the foot in the door of society again.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think that there is going to be some interesting applications in the ways that we kind of then take it and run with it in different ways as well. And I could see it also being about skill building and I would not be surprised if literature started to come out where people start to learn new skills better. And there's already some research that does verify this in different ways where, ironically enough, that guy I reached out to, James Fadiman, in the 70s, he did a study where he worked with different types of professionals. I think there was maybe 26 people who were like engineers, architects, people that showed up, they signed up for this study, and basically what qualified you for this study was, are you a professional who's had a work-related problem that has stuck with you for a long amount of time that you just haven't been able to crack? Like, what's this problem professionally you have that you just can't quite find a solution for? So people enrolled in a study that involved LSD, and they basically went through creative problem-solving exercises while on like a low therapeutic dose of LSD. And I think every single one of them considered that they made significant impact in their ability to solve the problem. They could not crack for months before this.
Amazing.
So that is really interesting to me from a problem-solving standpoint and what that implies just about skill building and seeing things from new angles. And that's a really exciting future ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking about cultures of the past that's been part of their culture and what they've done, and then it sort of gets lost or whatnot. Maybe there's another little revolution where it will be sort of a worldwide thing, hopefully, where it can actually help move us forward rather than where we're headed now, which doesn't seem to be a great direction.
Oh, I know. We need more than ever. But at the same time, I don't like to be someone like I think if you call a psychedelic space, we've sort of put this idea away of I think if you're looking at this in a healthy way, like psychedelics are not going to save humanity. That's kind of story that's been thrown around, like you give this to politicians and all the problems are going to go away.
Put in their water.
Like lace the water with LSD, it's just, well, sorry, it's not that simple. But I would say that there's going to be a slow impact that does crawl out, which absolutely does make a bigger collective shift.
Like a ripple effect.
I wouldn't say it's going to be like assigned to psychedelics only, but it's, in a society that's at least somewhat adjusted to psychedelic use, well, what does that society look like? On average, people are just going to make different decisions, even in a little bit better fashion, on average. And when that compounds over decades and generations, you have a better society. Not perfect, but you inch things forward for sure by healing people, because most of the problems we have are down to people's trauma basically being the thing that drives them in ways they're not even aware of. It's not even a trauma conversation because that's not how we see it. But anyone who's really messing things up, you could say, is someone who's dealing with some real shit that hasn't been dealt with, and that's why they do what they do,
Exactly. Yeah, and a lot of people like Jocko and Jocko's podcast, he's had a lot of veteran squad who've done ibogaine or other psychedelics. And they're always afraid of I'm going to lose my edge. I'm going to come back and be not myself. And they come back and no, I can still put that switch on if I need to, but the pain that was causing the problem has lessened. And so they're more adaptive now rather than they were before. And they're on 45 VA psych meds, that's doing the opposite thing that they want. I think you've probably seen that too. People come into fears like this is going to alter my personality, or going to come back and be just not who I think I am. It's probably all ego fears, but I don't think it really does that necessarily. I've never seen somebody, unless they have some sort of a bad LSD trip before they've abused it. People don't really abuse psychedelics, but I think there are some cases, maybe people with schizophrenia have got a hold of that, and it's made that like a gas in the fire scenario. But for most people, I don't think they disassemble and not reassemble. I think they heal, but they also can keep those parts that they value. Is that what you've seen?
Absolutely. Within myself, I've seen it in certain ways. Let's say my obsessional quality that I described. What that looks like now is when I want to pay attention to something, I'm fixed on it. If I have a problem that I'm trying to get underneath, I will examine it and find the solution. And I can kind of hold my attention on a certain thing for a very long time if I need to. But I can also turn it off now. I can step away from it. And in a similar type of way, I see this all the time on our retreats where, maybe some high-powered kind of executive kind of comes down. And as you said, they've had an edge. That's kind of what got them to where they are at in their life. That's what made them successful, is being able to pursue things and be unrelenting in what they're moving towards. And what drives them is so powerful that it gets shit done. But it also controls their life, and other parts of their life may be in total disarray. But for whatever reason, they've chosen maybe a certain path. And if we're talking about an executive, for them, that path is just to accomplish, to succeed, to get stuff done, and kind of to hell maybe with everything around you in your life. And so you've got your family life collapsing around you. You have no friends, but you're great at what you do, kind of thing. But you're also suffering on the inside because it's not the whole picture. And so what happens when those people do the work and the healing is they don't lose their ability now all of a sudden to do the thing they've already done for decades. That's an adaptive pattern that was developed and isn't going anywhere. But that's also the you could the term post-traumatic growth kind of thing, where you adapt due to trauma, and it tends to lead to some skill or some change that is healthy when it fits alongside other things that are also in balance. But when you're traumatized, you tend to have a very like isolated type of thing that kind of holds you and maybe you move through the world with. And so what happens when these people heal is you not only remain great at what you do and driven, but you actually have different capacities that now open up to you that actually allow the whole thing to be a lot more balanced and more in check. And you can be great at what you do for work, but you also know how to now tend to your family. You know what was kind of stepping in the way of that. You maybe understand why you were driven to succeed at work because it's actually related to the way you got approval from your dad. And in a very unconscious way, this is literally the whole reason you've done what you've done your whole life. It's been like your North Star and you haven't even realized it. Like
Bingo.
that kind of realization and the motion behind that. And then being able to let go of that and be like, well, I don't need to get my father's approval anymore. Like I'm better than that. I deserve more than that. Like you now actually have a bit more, you have like a personal agency that becomes greater. You have you become a more sovereign being in order to decide how I actually want to live my life. You know, because you understand yourself more. You sort of understand your trap doors and everything, and you know the ways in which you kind of miss the mark on that, and inadvertently basically went through life not knowing any better though.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I can totally see how this would be amazing with psychotherapy, and you know you go through the whatever medicine you're using, and then you process it with your therapist. You go back in. Say more about what you're doing now, what you guys offer in Jamaica. Do you integrate therapists, or is it more just like trip sitting, quote unquote? I don't know if a better term to use. What are you guys doing down there?
Yeah.
Electroshock therapy? Or...
no lobotomies or anything.
Lobotomies, yeah. It's gone. So is your mind.
Yeah, so my company's name is Mycomeditations, and I've been an owner of it for 8 years now. And it's eventually where my journey led me. So I came from my own retreat, 7 days, and it was highly, highly transformative, kind of a culmination of the years before that. And right around that time, I was just getting out of university, not sure what I wanted to do with my life, but the door was there to get involved with Myco. And so I came on board, and it's just been the thing that's basically what brings me purpose in my life is this work. And so what Mycomeditations has developed into is what we strive to do essentially is to create the gold standard for what a psychedelic therapy retreat can be. And awesome. Kind of based in your questioning as well is like how many people understand this work is done is like you do psychedelics with just some kind of safety guidance of like a trip sitter and maybe like a little integration circle afterwards. It's like that's kind of one facet of it, but it's not really the most robust therapeutic protocol. Right. If you want to really work with trauma and people who kind of have some of the backgrounds that we deal with. So we're a company that we host 8-day retreats where people typically come on a retreat starting Friday, and then Saturday is going to be dose number 1, Monday is going to be dose number 2, and Wednesday is going to be dose number 3. And those weeks, the days in between are all days dedicated to integration. So it's a week immersion basically into 3 high-dose sessions with psilocybin, done in true psilocybin therapy form, because most retreat aspects are going to be like a group of people in a circle with a handful of facilitators kind of checking in with people. We have retreats that don't really get any bigger than 10 people, and we'll have a team of 6 to 7 therapists and facilitators guiding that experience. And 80 to 90% of our facilitation team at this point also happen to be licensed therapists. So Brilliant. We bring like a very therapeutic approach to this where the sessions are done privately basically because we have such a ratio of staff to guests is very high. It's almost 1-to-1 that allows us to have our guests kind of spread across our retreat properties, which are all located here in Jamaica. They're all a few acres, but like beautiful vacation villas, if you imagine that. Wow. But all selected carefully for optimal kind of characteristics for doing a retreat in. And basically what a session looks like is the whole group spreads after we give out the dose and go to a different part of the property. So some might be in their rooms, some might be under a big almond tree in the shade, some might be under a tent we've set up overlooking the ocean. And then each of those people are going to have a therapist or a facilitator alongside them for the whole experience. And so we're working as a team then to see kind of what's bubbling up with people. You know, we kind of shift ourselves. If someone needs a lot of attention and one therapist is working with them for 2 hours because it's a heavy experience, like we all kind of shuffle around it, because most of the time, most people are internally within their experience, behind eye shades, listening to music. Like we curate custom playlists and suggestions for people. And it's all under this protocol of go inside, stick with the experience. And we're there to guide that process. Like it's our job as facilitators to sort of keep them in the experience with the mushrooms, because that's really what's going to give them the most healing. And so within this whole immersive setting, we're also preparing them for every dose and kind of getting them more and more optimized to make better use of the next session that's going to come, which is why we do it 3 times. Like a lot of other retreats might offer 1 dose or 2 doses, but it's tricky because you then go all the way somewhere to maybe have 1 experience. And in that scenario, it's like, okay, well, we got to get this right. We have to either maybe play this a little conservative, but then we risk underdosing you and you don't get a super deep experience, or you play it risky and you try to give them a high dose, but maybe that's just overwhelming and too much to handle. And so we have the flexibility doing it under our protocol where you show up. And the first dose is really the only one that's more or less standardized. Like we kind of give everyone 3 to 4 grams of dried psilocybin mushrooms that we grow ourselves on that first dose. And we kind of tell people like this dose is maybe going to be slightly underwhelming, but that's kind of the point. Is what this is going to allow us to do is just see how familiar you are with this experience. How resistant are you to the experience? How much are you already sort of taking to turning yourself over and surrendering and just being with what comes up? And we kind of use that as a team to really understand what this person is, how they're relating with the experience, and then from there tailoring the dose to get it more on the point for each person and then more customized in that way.
That's great.
And yeah, what that allows you to do though is because it's going to look different for everyone. I mean, some people kind of need a little bit of a bigger dose to actually overcome certain types of unconscious barriers that exist. Because there's 2 ways that you can, and we do both ways. Like you kind of work with the client and the guest to get them to a point to understand that they're safe and that they can trust the experience and turn themselves over to it themselves. But you can also complement that where when you have bigger doses, it kind of also makes it almost seem inevitable that that's the next step. Like it's kind of just by the nature of a bigger dose is a little bit more intense on average in terms of, well, what intensity is just more clearly bringing you what needs to be seen to the surface kind of thing, to the point of like, okay, I have no point. There's no point to keep fighting this. Like I'm just going to surrender to it. And so just that whole process throughout the week is kind of the whole basis of our protocol, is to get people to surrender to what's within them, to see it, to become aware of it, and to process it. And then that's where all of the integration work happens, where every day in between a dose has like a 4-hour private/group therapy session where one at a time our therapists are going through with every person at the retreat one at a time and just getting them to recount their experience, and then we help them make sense of it. And we work with them to kind of arrive to the conclusions and to actually kind of help pull the string if there still needs to be some more emotional work done. And we work in a very relational type of capacity of therapy. Like that's a lot of the therapists we tend to bring on board. And the people I think who are most called to this kind of stuff tend to come from like an IFS background. And there's one therapist actually on our staff named Steve, who's well-trained in a therapeutic framework called Accelerated Experiential Dynamic Psychotherapy, also known as AEDP. And that's been, I only learned about it through him. And it was something I found my own therapist for, and it was hugely impactful. And what what that framework basically allows is it's really focused on the relationship between the therapist and the patient. And so it looks like a lot of stopping in the present moment to examine what's coming up for the therapist, where they actually use their own state to kind of reflect what your experience is bringing up within them, and using that as a way to actually connect and build intimacy through vulnerability. And it's really, really impactful in this kind of work too, with psychedelics, because that's a part of it. Is, as we've spoken about, you've got this new stuff coming up to the surface that might be maybe a little shameful or a little heavy. You don't know what to really do with it, but you're actually seeing that other people are there for you with all of this. They're not judging you for it. They're talking it out with you. You're seeing it's leaving a positive impact even on them. You're all the more loved for it and cared for because of it, that it teaches you slowly that, oh, these parts of myself that I've rejected are actually welcome. And that's great. That integration is where the healing comes in, Yeah, IFS parts and everything comes alive a lot with psychedelics, has been my finding.
I could see that, yeah. Do you ever find I don't know if you have one, but like sort of maybe a medical staff, a nurse on standby, because I know that you can have increased heart rate with psilocybin. Do you screen people for heart conditions, or how does that work?
No, we do a little bit of screening around cardio stuff, mainly around like recency of big events, or like, have you had a stroke recently? Have you had a heart attack recently? If a certain amount of time has passed, you're free to do psilocybin. It's safe. But like, if you have out of control blood pressure or anything, like if people report blood pressure, is that being managed? Generally, that you can screen very safely for anything heart related. The things we do screen for, though, are bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and different type of like psychotic types of features. And we even go into the steps of like, if you have a family background of those things as well, that we're playing it safe and not really risking that kind of thing. And those are the main things we're looking for, is on the more mental health side, because as I alluded to earlier, that concept of entropy, of chaos, it's like those are all very high chaos illnesses. So if you bring psychedelics into the system, you're already taking something that's a brain kind of predisposed to chaotic thinking patterns and creating more chaos in the system. And it's destabilizing. It can be very risky. And even if you don't actively have bipolar or schizophrenia, but that predisposition perhaps is there with family, there's a chance that it's really just dormant. And what a dormant case of bipolar looks like is you have the potential, and when a impactful enough psychological experience occurs, one that's adverse and challenging, it now kind of crumbles the whole system. And now you fall into that kind of chaotic space where you cannot manage your thinking anymore, and your mood, and it kind of now becomes disarrayed after that. And it can be tough to get that rebalanced afterwards. So that is one thing for people who are interested in pursuing psychedelics in different ways. Definitely take it serious if you have a predisposition to any of those types of things. Maybe look at ketamine. Ketamine's actually one that doesn't have the same risk profile when it comes to some of those other things. Interesting. There's also a whole world of like within psychedelics becoming back online through research. There's also sort of like a tangential industry emerging of psychoplastogens, which is like companies trying to basically research versions of psychedelics that take the mind-altering aspect out, but keep the neuroplastic kind of adjustment stuff in there. So I'd say give it maybe 5 years, and those kinds of medicines will likely be approved in different ways federally, because they are going through the FDA process slowly as well, just a little bit behind. But I think that'll open some interesting doors for people that psychedelics in the purest sense may not be well suited for.
That makes sense. As you guys are covering all your bases, that's good. Sounds like you have a good program. If someone wants to sign up, what do they do? Where do they go? How do they do it?
Yeah, you can check out our website, www.mycomeditations.com. So like MYCO meditations with an S on the end of it. And you can book a call with us if you want to learn more, or apply on our website. I mean, everyone who comes to our retreat has to submit an application that our therapy team approves. And once that happens, you can explore registering for a retreat. We do about 2 retreats a month right now. And so every other week we're running a retreat at one of our 3 different properties. So if people are out there who are interested in really diving deep with mushrooms, particularly in the most therapeutic way, really, you can work with mushrooms, then I would check us out.
If someone has psychedelic questions for you in general, is there a good place for people to go? Do you have an Instagram or email?
Yeah, I don't have much of a presence these days on Instagram, but I will say, just email me directly, Mike@Mycomeditations.com. I'm very, very on top of my emails, and I love to have conversations and get to know people. So feel free to send emails to my inbox.
That's great, because I think a lot of people have these questions and they don't really know who to talk to. They might read books, but you can't ask questions to a book. So having somebody that knows something is huge. Just like you reached out to the one researcher. I mean, that's awesome. Yep. So anybody listening, please, if you don't mind them blowing up your inbox, like that's awesome.
It's already blown up. Thankfully, I'm good at managing it. I have my systems.
Good. There we go. Trying to think of anything else I can ask you before we wrap it up. Maybe we should tie it off with men's work. We both work with Connor Beaton in the men's work space and Traver Bohm. I know that this is more of a male-centric audience, but I do have female listeners to this podcast. And I always say men's work is women's work and women's work is men's work, because if we heal ourselves, we help the feminine or our partners. Whole separate topic. How might that work, or how have you found that work relate to men's work for you, and for how can that help other men in going with their own men's work journey?
I think it's all about that theme I've kind of touched on, about just learning to accept different parts of yourself, learning to see what's there, integrating it. And men's work really allows people a space to do that in the same way. Just, it's a different type of healing system we use. It's relational, but it's all this, it's just as important, and I think I got into men's work in 2020, actually, where my first men's group I participated in for 2.5 years was online, largely with some guys that were mostly based out of San Diego that I met online through actually one of the original managers of Connor's Facebook group way back. So he started his own group. His name's Tyson Adams. And that was kind of my intro into creating a space where just men could be there and talk about the things that we kind of feel we maybe need our own spaces to talk about. Just like I think women have those. Yeah. We all need our spaces to be with other men. And this is kind of our story. This is the stuff we hold. And I do believe that there is a certain limit of what you ought to share, of course, with like your significant other or your wife or everyone in our life. There's kind of, in the same way you don't tell everything to your child because it'll overwhelm them. There's just a certain reason that you don't need to tell everything to everyone all the time. Even if it's the person you love more than anything in the world, there's just a certain type of experience you need to save for people that kind of just get it and, can go into the trenches with you. There's not going to be any shame or stigma or judgment. We all know we're flawed individuals, and this is the whole point. But we don't need to burden some of the people in our lives with this stuff. That's what these spaces are for. And that's been the real value of it for me, is just being able to have spaces to talk with men that are vulnerable, that are real, which I think is oftentimes missing in the average male relationship. At least was for a good chunk of my adult life. And, people that are willing to bring things to the table that are serious and heavy, and the stuff that we sit with day after day, but never give it a chance to see the light of day, but we just sit with it and cover it with shame in order to muster on by and to expose it and bring it to the light by talking about it. I mean, I can't even count whether it's psychedelics or men's work or with a therapist, just that relief you get where you actually say something that you've felt shame about your whole life, and you just actually muster up the courage to put it onto the table, let other people see it, and realize you're not going to die, or you're not going to be punished, or you can just be accepted for it is just so healing. And that's the whole point.
Yeah.
I think men's work gives guys a much needed space to relate with stuff that really matters.
Mm-hmm. Well said. You're awesome, man. This has been good. I'll link everything in the show notes so people can find you. Thanks for coming on. We'll have to do a round 2 or 3 at some point. Maybe by then you'll have like you'll have the man bun next time or something.
Yeah, well, I'm actually thinking of going to the other end. Maybe I'm just buzz cutting it soon. I'm thinking I might just swing the other way. Yeah.
You think it suits you?
Thanks. Appreciate it.
You got it. Well, all right. We'll talk soon.
Yeah. Pleasure talking to you, man.
Likewise.